Hello and welcome to ACT Reading for Owls. This is going to be week number 8. I can't believe we've been together for 8 weeks already. In today's lesson, we're going to be reading a practice passage. This is titled Pride by Alice Munro, and it is the first passage in a brand new practice exam that we're moving into. After that, we're going to answer practice questions number 1 through 10. I'm going to give you another big tip about doing the reading portion of the ACT, and I've got a surprise announcement as a thank you to you at the very end of this. So, here in a moment, I'm going to screen share the passage Pride by Alice Munro, and I'm also going to screen share the questions. If you want, while I'm reading this out loud, you can find a PDF of the passage and the questions in a link in the description below. The practice exam link below does have 4 passages as usual, but we are only doing the first one today. We're going to do the next 3 passages over the next 3 videos. I'm going to survey the questions and read the passage out loud. If you want, you can fast forward this video when I begin reading, if you would rather read the passage on your own though. And as always, a note on timing. Remember that the time that we take to do this together is going to be longer than what would take for a passage like this on a real ACT, because I'm going to be pausing, we're going to be reading the passage, kind of going back and forth, talking about it. So on a real ACT, remember that you're not taking the time to do all of this. Let's go ahead and flip on over. All right. This is a literary narrative passage, so we're back to that very first style that we started with. Before we read, as always, we're just going to briefly survey these questions. All right, based on the passage, it could be assumed the narrator gained the knowledge to tell this story about Jansen by, so how does the author come to know these details? In the context of the passage, which of the following statements most strongly foreshadows Jansen's downfall? This suggests that in considering who convinced him to invest in manufacturing steam-driven cars, most people in town, which is true of people's behavior when the narrator returned to town after his apprenticeship? Which best paraphrases the narrator's comments in lines 14 through 16? As it's used in line 16, the word nursing most nearly means, so let's be on a lookout for that particular part of the passage. We'll read that one really closely. The narrator speculates that whoever convinced Jansen to invest in a steam-driven car must have been. Based on the passage, it's most logical to conclude that the original steam-driven cars were. According to the passage, the majority of the investment money to manufacture a steam-driven car came from. And finally, the narrator states that people assumed it was pride that drove Jansen to do one of these things. Let's go full screen for this. All right. Now that we have a brief overview of some things to keep an eye out for, let's go ahead and begin reading. Oneida didn't go to school with the rest of us. She went to a girls' school, a private school. Even in the summers, she was not around much. I believe the family had a place on Lake Simcoe. Oneida was an unusual name. Her father, I believe, called her Ida. Ida's father ran the bank. Even in those days, bankers came and went, I suppose to keep them from ever getting too cozy with the customers. But the Jansens had been having their way in town for too long for any regulations to matter, or that was how it seemed. Horace Jansen had certainly the look of a man born to be in power, a heavy white beard and a ponderous expression. In the hard times of the 30s, people were still coming up with ideas. You can be sure men were nursing a notion bound to make them $1 million. $1 million in those days was $1 million. That, by the way, was the passage that had the 2 questions about it. It wasn't any railway bum, however, who got into the bank to talk to Horace Jansen. Who knows if it was a single person or a cohort, maybe a stranger or some friends of friends. Well-dressed and plausible looking, you may be sure. Horace set store by appearances. He wasn't a fool, though maybe not as quick as he should have been to smell a rat. The idea was the resurrection of the steam-driven car, such as had been around at the turn of the century. Horace Jansen may have had one himself and had a fondness for them. This new model would be an improved version, of course, and have the advantages of being economical and not making a racket. I'm not acquainted with the details, having been in high school at the time, but I can imagine the leak of talk and the scoffing and enthusiasm and the news getting through some entrepreneurs from Toronto or Windsor or Kitchener getting ready to set up shop locally. Some hotshots, people would say, and others would ask if they had the backing. They did indeed, because the bank had put up the loan. It was Jansen's decision, and there was some confusion that he had put in his own money. He may have done so, but he'd also dipped improperly into bank funds, thinking no doubt that he would pay it back with nobody the wiser. Maybe the laws were not so tight then. There were actually men hired, and the old livery stable was cleared out to be their place of operations. And here my memory grows shaky because I graduated from high school and I had to think about earning a living if that was possible. I settled for bookkeeping, and that meant going out of town to apprentice to an outfit in Goderich. By the time I got back home, the steam car operation was spoken of with scorn by the people who had been against it, and not at all by those who had promoted it. The visitors to town who promoted it had disappeared. The bank had lost a lot of money. There was talk not of cheating, but of mismanagement. Somebody had to be punished. Any ordinary manager would have been out on his ear, but given that it was Horace Jansen, this was avoided. What happened to him was almost worse. He was switched to the job of bank manager in the little village of Hawksburg, about 6 miles up the highway. Prior to this, there had been no manager there at all because they didn't need one. There had just been a head cashier and an underling cashier, both women. Surely he could have refused, but pride, as it was thought, chose otherwise. Pride chose that he be driven every morning those 6 miles to sit behind a partial wall of cheap varnished boards, no proper office at all. There he sat and did nothing until it was time for him to be driven home. The person who drove him home was his daughter. Sometime in those years of driving, she made the transition from Ida to Oneida. At last, she had something to do. If I picture Oneida and her father on these journeys to and from Hawksburg, I see him riding in the back seat and her in the front like a chauffeur. It may have been that he was too bulky to ride up beside her. I don't see Oneida looking downtrodden or unhappy at the arrangement, nor her father looking actually unhappy. Dignity was what he had, and plenty of it. She had something different. When she went into a store or even walked on the street, there seemed to be a little space cleared around her, made ready for whatever she might want or greetings she might spread. She seemed then a bit flustered but gracious, ready to laugh a little at herself or the situation. Of course, she had her good bones and bright looks, all that fair dazzle of skin and hair. So it might seem strange that I could feel sorry for her, the way she was all on the surface of things, trusting. Interesting passage there. Next up, we're going to go ahead and move on to those questions. As always, I'm going to provide an opportunity for you to pause the video and try to find the answer yourself before I say what the answer actually is. If you want, have a scrap piece of paper down to write your answers, or just open up maybe a blank document on your laptop side by side with this video so that you can guess what your answer might be. Answers, in case you miss one, are also going to be listed on the next slide. All right. Number 1, based on the passage, it could be assumed that the narrator gained the knowledge to tell this story about Jansen by... Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. The right answer for number 1 is A, piecing the story together out of hearsay and his own recollections. This is a craft and structure question, and the passage doesn't come right out and say, oh, the narrator, put these pieces together from what he heard, but rather remember that he goes out of town to learn, I think that it said bookkeeping, so he's not really there when this happens. So you can reasonably infer that he had to hear what other people said about this, and then he puts it together to make the story that he tells you. Number 2, in the context of the passage, which of the following statements most strongly foreshadows Jansen's downfall? To foreshadow is to indicate or hint that something is coming, by the way. Pause this, take a moment, and see if you can't find the right answer. This one might require you to scroll back up and see. The right answer here, though, is H. He wasn't a fool, though maybe not as quick as he should have been to smell a rat. The idea that he was a smart person, but he was able to be fooled, and maybe he should have been a little bit more careful. Maybe he should have smelled a rat that they reference up here. That would indicate that maybe something bad is coming, that he's about to take a risk that he should not otherwise take. And we know that his bank ends up going in on this idea that fails. And so 2 is going to be H for that reason. And that is a key ideas and details question. Heads up, there are a lot of those in this passage. Number 3, the passage suggests that in considering who convinced Jansen to invest in manufacturing steam-driven cars, most people in town... Take a moment, pause this, and see if you can't find the right answer. And this is, of course, another key ideas and details question. The answer here is D, indulged in speculation, but didn't know for sure who it had been. This one relies on a really close reading of the events related in the passage above. So in considering who convinced him to invest. Yeah. Here we go, yeah. Who knows who it might have been. They were probably well-dressed and plausible looking. Horace set store by appearances. Yeah, that's going to be D right there. And that is, of course, another key ideas and details question. Number 4, which of the following is true of people's behavior when the narrator returned to town after his apprenticeship? Ooh, this looks like a hard one. All right, if you want, take a moment and pause and see if you can't find the right answer. All right, the correct answer for this is H. Statements 1, 3, and 4 are going to be true. Statement number 2, is not going to be true. And the passage actually states that they do not believe that he had been cheating. Here we go. Yeah, the bank had lost a lot of money. There was talk not of cheating, but of mismanagement. So that's going to invalidate number 2, but the rest of them are going to hold accurate. And that's, of course, the key ideas and details question. Moving up to number 5, which of the following best paraphrases the narrator's comments in lines 14 through 16? I wonder if I can get those on the same screen here. Will they fit? Oh, not quite. So I'm going to scroll back up here real fast and let's reread that before I let you guys pause. In the hard times of the 30s, people were still coming up with ideas. You can be sure men were nursing a notion bound to make them $1 million. $1 million in those days was $1 million. Oh, and you know what? I might need to start reading a little bit before that. Let's see, but the Jansons had been having their way in town for too long for any regulations to matter, or that was how it seemed. Horace Jansen had certainly the look of a man born to be in power, a heavy white beard and a ponderous expression. Then we talk about people coming up with ideas and making $1 million. All right, I'm going to pause, or if you want, feel free to pause this and I'll come back to you here in just a moment with the right answer. The correct answer for number 5 is B. Because times were hard, people were trying to find new money-making schemes. That's supported just by those lines up there that we read. And this, of course, is a key ideas and details question. And then number 6, as it is used in line 16, the word nursing most nearly means, make sure you go back up and actually see. When it's a word like that that can have multiple meanings, make sure you actually see the context. You can be sure men were nursing a notion bound to make them $1 million. $1 million in those days was $1 million. All right, pause this and see if you can't find the right answer. The correct answer for number 6 is J, fostering. To foster something means to take care of it, to nurture it, to let it grow. I hope that you didn't choose H, healing. While nursing also can mean healing, as it's used contextually, it means that they're taking care of this idea and they're helping this idea to grow. Men were nursing a notion bound to make them $1 million. Here they've got this idea and they're watering it, they're growing it, they're trying to make sure that it comes to fruition. They're really, really hoping that it comes true. They're fostering this hope. And number 6 is a craft and structure question. Number 7, the narrator speculates that whoever convinced Jansen to invest in a steam-driven car must have been, pause this and see if you can find the right answer. The right answer for number 7 is A, must have been well-dressed. Jansen would have been impressed by someone who looked affluent, which is another word for rich. And if we come back up here, we can see that he puts a lot of store by appearances. Yeah, well-dressed and plausible looking, you may be sure. Horace set store by appearances. So this person must have looked like they knew what they were talking about. And number 7 is a key ideas and details question. Number 8, based on the passage, it's most logical to conclude that the original steam-driven cars were, pause this and see if you can't find the right answer. The correct answer for number 8 is F, expensive and noisy. Because if we come up here and see what these new cars would have to be, this new model would be an improved version, of course, and have the advantages of being economical and not making a racket. So if this is what the new car is going to be, and that's worth mentioning, that must mean the old car was not economical and was not, not making a racket. So that would be expensive and noisy. Economical, by the way, means cheap or affordable. And that, of course, is key ideas and details. Number 9, according to the passage, the majority of the investment money to manufacture a steam-driven car came from, pause this and see if you can find the right answer. The right answer for number 9 is C, the bank Jansen was managing. We can come back up here and see. The bank had put up the loan. It was Jansen's decision, and there was some confusion that he had put in his own money. He may have done so, but he'd also dipped improperly into bank funds, thinking he could pay it back with no one the wiser. So we see from there that it's going to be C, the bank he's managing, and that, of course, is a key ideas and details question. And now we're on to the very last one, number 10. The narrator states that people assumed it was pride that drove Jansen to, pause this and see if you can't find the right answer. The correct answer for number 10 is G, agree to manage the Hawksburg Bank. That is the bank that is located 6 miles away that doesn't really need a manager. But of course, he's not going to be able to keep his previous bank managing job because of the poor decision that he made to invest bank money in this failure of steam cars or steam-powered cars. And so while it is sort of a demotion, he's still a bank manager, right? And because he's got dignity and pride, he's going to want to keep some sort of this job. And so 10, of course, then is going to be G, and this is a key ideas and details question, just like number 9 was, by the way, if I didn't quite mention that. There we go. There's questions 1 through 10 down. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. Here are the answers in case you missed one. Note that there were 8 key ideas and details questions. Oh my gosh. And then only 2 craft and structure, and no integration of knowledge and ideas questions on this passage. If you need to, pause the screen to review any answers that you might have missed. Moving on here, we've got big tip number 6. There are certain kinds of trap answers that seem perhaps right in a sense, or that are designed to maybe get you to guess that answer, but they're not the right answer. These are what kind of distractors you might run into. There are 5 listed here from Kaplan. First, there are distortion answers. These will twist around details from the passage so that they're no longer correct. An example of that would be number 2 right here. People in town blame the loss of money on Jansen having cheated. No. In fact, the passage said there was no mention of that. So that's twisting a detail just to try to maybe confuse you a little bit. Misuse detail, a true statement from the passage, but one that doesn't answer the question. That's a really key thing to keep in mind. Make sure you're always answering the question that's being asked. Just because an answer choice is something that you remember from the passage doesn't mean that it's the right answer for the exact question being asked. Then there's out of scope. This includes information that's not included in the passage, just bringing in some random outside stuff to try to distract you a little bit. There are extreme wrong answers too. These are too extreme to reflect the author's purpose, and words that should immediately throw up red flags for you include always, never, best, worst. Really extreme answers are not often the right one. And that's going to be true, really, I think, in just about any multiple choice reading, whether it is for the ACT or for something else, like for an AP exam, something like that. And finally, there are opposite distractors. These contradict the information in the passage. This is going to go against what you've read. And actually, as I'm saying that, perhaps the example that I used earlier where it says people in town blame the loss of money, maybe that's actually more accurately an opposite wrong answer. In any case, it's the wrong answer. And so hopefully you didn't, select that when you were doing the practice. But knowing some things to look out for and knowing some little red flags to keep an eye out for can really help you improve your ACT reading performance. And a surprise announcement, as my thank you to you for sticking through and being committed to bettering your reading ACT score. And of course, this is not just going to help you on the reading ACT, but it's going to help you anytime that you have to read and comprehend, which is, in just about every class. And for sure, once you're a grown-up, it'll be something you have to do consistently. My thank you to you, the first 10 students to come and find me on Tuesday, November 2nd, so not Monday, not today, tell me one type of trap answer listed on the previous slide is going to earn a prize. I will be in room 3108 during hours 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7. I might be hanging out there 3 and 4, but no guarantees that that's where I'll be. Those trap answers again are distortion, misuse detail, out of scope, extreme, and opposite. Come and tell me one of those, and if you're one of the first 10, then I'm going to give you a prize. Just my thank you to you for sticking through it and being committed to bettering yourself. And finally, Next week, we are going to look at that same practice exam. We're going to be doing the second passage there. There's no need to do anything outside of AI time to prepare for next week. And you're going to continue to learn tips, tricks, and strategies for accurately answering questions on the ACT reading portion. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.